This looks like really another sort of failed Trump deal, which is not surprising, I think, to anybody in the military world. He might be brilliant at doing business deals, but he seems to be pretty inept at doing anything on the military stage. And presumably the Israelis have got frustrated.
Hi, I'm Jo Crawford, and welcome to Times Radio's Trump Report. You can listen to the Trump Report wherever you get your podcasts from, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today, I'm joined by former British Colonel and current military and security analyst, Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. Thank you for joining me on the Trump Report today.
Thanks very much for having me.
So the Israeli Air Force has launched a major attack on Iran, and Iran has responded. What do we know so far?
Well, I think, first of all, the attack on Iran, this has probably been years, if not decades, in the planning, and all focused on Iran's desire to have a nuclear capability. And people are maybe forgetting that Israel is a nuclear capable state. They have nuclear weapons, although they don't declare it, and they certainly haven't signed any nuclear treaties. But the concern was that certainly in recent times, Iran is getting much closer to having that. Even Iran themselves admitted in the last few weeks that they had enriched uranium to plus of 60%. In order to have a nuclear weapon, you need uranium enriched to about 95%. And also, of course, the Americans have been concerned about them getting close to this capability. For some time, the Israelis have threatened that they would take out the ability for Iran to get a nuclear weapon. And that seems to be what has happened overnight. In pure military terms, it would appear that jets and missiles have attacked, particularly a place called Natanz, which is the center of Iran's nuclear development program, a whole host of other military sites, and also some key commanders, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, General Soleimani, and a few other key people. So this is a very comprehensive set of attacks. I say it's been a long time in the planning. To get that level of detail and intelligence would mean that no doubt there are lots, hundreds, if not thousands of Israeli spies or people spying for Israel on the ground doing this. We know that last year Israel took out a lot of the air defense assets around some of these sites as a sort of precursor, as a build-up and warning to this. And previously to that, Israel had destroyed Hezbollah, which is the sort of military terrorist proxy of Iran operating in Syria and Lebanon, and very key to everything that Iran does. So it's sort of been shaping the battlefield. We are yet to see what we call the battle damage assessment so far. However, it would appear to be pretty extensive, particularly around Natanz. We understand that several of Iran's key nuclear scientists have been killed. And the amount of aircraft involved in this and the sort of even the early stages, the damage we're seeing, it looks fairly comprehensive. So, without wanting to prejudge anything, I would judge that a lot of those centrifuges that are enriching uranium are probably destroyed. And certainly, in practical terms, it will put back Iran's nuclear program quite considerably. I suppose the only other thing to say on this, the backdrop that President Trump has been negotiating. He tells the world a deal with Iran, and this looks like really another sort of failed Trump deal, which is not surprising, I think, to anybody in the military world. He might be brilliant at doing business deals, but he seems to be pretty inept at doing anything on the military stage. And presumably the Israelis have got frustrated. This is why they've attacked. I think the only other thing, lots of people are talking about retaliation, and apparently Iran have already fired 100 drones at Israel, which we understand the Israelis claim they've knocked them all down. I cannot really see how Iran can retaliate in any really meaningful way. As I said, Hezbollah, who would have done the terror acts in the past, don't really exist anymore. Even the Houthis are very much degraded, and Hamas likewise.
It was only yesterday when the International Atomic Watchdog found that Iran was not complying with its nuclear obligations for the first time in 20 years. Iran claims that it's always adhered to safeguarding obligations, but we heard from Trump yesterday in response to this, and he said that a massive conflict could break out in the Middle East over the issue of Iran's nuclear program. But he said that he wanted some sort of diplomatic solution. Iran has accused the US of supposedly being involved in these current Israeli strikes on Iran, but the US has strongly denied these claims. Do you think that Trump had any sort of indication this might happen?
Well, I would be very surprised if Trump, or certainly the CIA and the US military, didn't have some indication. I think there is no indication that American physical military assets were involved, in other words, fighter jets and all the rest of it. But no doubt there would be a lot of American air assets in the air at the time, perhaps listening and watching. I would be very surprised if Trump didn't have some indication. I think for us, sat here in the UK, it's very difficult to understand the relationship between the Israelis and the Americans, or rather between Trump and the Israeli government. And it would be surprising if no US intelligence was involved. It might not be involved absolutely on the day, but I am sure that America collects a heck of a lot of intelligence about Iran, and I'm sure with its very close relationship with Israel, probably shares that. So although we don't think, or certainly that's the Americans were saying, they were not directly involved, no doubt there is some of their DNA in there anyway.
And in light of these Israeli strikes on Iran, how do you think we can expect the White House to respond to this? Trump has previously warned Netanyahu that they shouldn't attack Iran while Washington was working on that nuclear deal between Iran and the US. How do you think that's going to impact relations there between Israel and the US?
Well, again, it's very interesting. I think, unfortunately, Trump gets involved in these sort of grand strategic negotiations, and I don't want to be arrogant enough to suggest that he doesn't really understand what he's getting involved in here. But certainly, in his time in office so far, when he has tried to bring his business brilliance to the military and political sphere, it's sort of failed, or really hasn't helped the situation, and we've seen that so clearly in Ukraine. And when it comes to Israel, I mean, it is Israel is a country that really acts with complete 100% commitment, not too bothered about what other people think, and not too bothered what its allies think either. As Netanyahu has stated, he sees Iran as the biggest threat to Israel, and will do anything to subdue it. No doubt, for the last few months, Netanyahu has allowed Trump to, play the main player in this, because the Israelis are so reliant on American hardware and intelligence and financial support to keep going. But presumably, it's come a stage where even Netanyahu has run out of patience with Trump's ability to do a deal here, and telling, as you say, last week, lots of people are confirming that the Iranians were getting pretty close to that sort of 90% enrichment stage where they could get a bomb. I mean, lots of people are saying, well, look at North Korea. They have nuclear weapons and a missile. I think this is slightly different. Certainly, North Korea is trying to develop a nuclear warhead and has some missiles. Reliable intelligence suggests that they have not been able to fit the two together yet. The concern with Iran is, one of the leading developers and manufacturers of missiles, and the Ukrainians know that to their peril, unfortunately. So I think the issue with Iran was just having a nuclear warhead. They've got the missiles, so they are much closer, and have the ability, with their strategic position in the Middle East, to create absolute mayhem where perhaps North Korea doesn't. So I think people conflating the two issues should slightly be careful there. But that, I think, what has happened now is from what we understand and what we're seeing is I expect the Iranian nuclear program has been pushed back a considerable way, because, getting the 100 or so centrifuges they needed, if one assumes that the vast majority of those are now broken, it's not a insignificant task to redo that. And of course, there is great focus on them. The final thing, one would say here, when looking at retaliation, Israel is a nuclear state, and Iran knows that. Not suggesting that Israel would, look at that, but when one looks at retaliation, what Iran could do, whether it, obviously it can't nuclear, they may well have chemical weapons and other sort of grey zone type weapons that they could use. But in the back of their minds, even the Ayatollah realizes that Israel does have the ultimate deterrence in nuclear.
There's reports that we should expect a much larger response from Iran following these Israeli strikes today. Last October, it was reported that a lot of Iranian air defences were impacted by Israeli strikes in October. It's also reported that Iran potentially hasn't been able to rebuild these air defences. So what sort of response do you think we can expect from Iran?
Well, I'm not entirely sure, because also we understand that the Israelis struck their main sort of missile production sites and military missile capabilities. So the obvious response would be loads of hypersonic type missiles fired at Israel. But as you say, they've tried that twice, in October last year and in April last year, and 99% of them got shot out of the sky and didn't really have an impact at all. And it would almost be a double negative for Iran if it did fire everything it had at Israel and everything was shot down. It sort of shows how tied it is, its inability to come back at what has been a complete humiliation for Iran. They were humiliated when their proxies Hezbollah and the Houthis were destroyed. They were humiliated last year when they tried to retaliate against Israel and every weapon was shot down. And at the moment, their initial reaction, 100 drones at Israel, 100 appear to be shot down. So it's a pretty tricky one. And, and with their key commanders also taken out now, and the way that these sort of autocratic regimes work, there's probably, not somebody fully briefed up and with the right experience to step in immediately to these shoes. And of course, slightly like America, when you've got somebody like Donald Trump running the show who doesn't really understand what military capability and fighting wars is all about, you could suggest that maybe the Ayatollah is in the same position, and the mullahs who support him.
Do you think this is an end to any sort of nuclear deal between the US and Iran?
Well, let's hope not, because no doubt this will not change the aspirations of Iran to become a nuclear capable country. It may push them back considerably, but if they can see the value of doing a deal with Donald Trump, rather than us going through this cycle again and again and again, then obviously that would be a good thing. And for the rank and file in Iran, the sort of silent majority, I mean, this must be all horrific. And we have seen various sort of riots and people trying to rebel against the authorities in Iran. Now, no doubt, the mullahs in Iran will be balancing making too big a show of this and not big enough. If the populace, who seem to be generally unsupportive of the leaders, get to hear all this, it might perpetuate something sort of that the government in Tehran really don't want. So it's going to be a really challenging time, I think, over the next few days and weeks. And how others react. I mean, Iran doesn't have many close allies. It's, I think, the silence coming out of Moscow at the moment is deafening. One will be interested to see what Russia has to say, who is a close ally of Iran. But Russia relies on Iran for missiles and drones and ammunition. I expect Iran might be slightly less keen to hand those over now. and other sort of terrorist organisations who might ally to Iran are they have suffered a lot too. We haven't really heard much from the Gulf states at the moment, but these are very early days, and I expect a lot of people will be just waiting to see how the dust settles before going forward. But it's going to take a few days for this to shake out, I expect.
And I mean, if we look at what a potential nuclear deal could look like, there's concerns from Israel that it still might leave Iran with some sort of nuclear program there. I mean, do you think that that's still a possibility after what we heard from the watchdog yesterday?
Well, I mean, let's hope so. Let's hope that there is some rhyme and reason in all of this. No doubt the people of Iran want sanctions lifted so that they can, start to try and live a sort of normalish sort of life and eat the sort of food and get the resources that one would expect, which are so hampered at the moment. Not least with being unable to travel widely because any aircraft that Iran has is probably an American or a European one, and they can't get spare parts for it. So, and you see pictures of Boeings just parked up in airfields in Iran, unable to fly. So, I'm sure the vast majority of Iran would like to see some sort of deal. And again, if Trump can get a deal, then this might be the time to do it when particularly the Iranians are on the back foot. And I'm sure if Trump can milk any positive out of this, then he probably will do. Again, when America wakes up, no doubt we will hear what the great man has to say.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to hear what he does say. Hamish, thank you so much for joining me on the Trump Report today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.